And welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Judy Robinett. She's the author of the new book, which is called Crack the Funding Code: How Investors Think and What They Need to Hear to Fund Your Startup, which is a new HarperCollins release in 2019. She's also the author of How to Be a Power Connector, the 550-150 Rule. There's so many other things she is. I don't want to dilute any of it, but she was the managing director of Golden Seed's Angel Network. She was a member of the Department of Commerce team that defined performance criteria for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. And she received an award from Bill Clinton for that. And she's a world-renowned speaker, co-author Crowdfunding for Dummies, and an all-around smart and wise person. So thank you, Judy.
Oh, geez. Thanks, Peter.
Now all you have to do is live up to that great introduction.
That's right.
So I get to sit back and so I guess for you, let me sort of frame this a different way. So you speak and you write, but your core business seems to be on the angel investing and all that. So could you maybe paint a picture for us on how content, thought leadership, speaking, writing, et cetera, is all connected to the other things that you do and how they support one another?
Sure. So I was CEO of a public biotech company for about 9 years, and somebody from Park City, Utah asked me if I would go look at this unknown startup called Skull Candy. And I was really enamored and helped Rick Alden, who was broke at the time and had products stuck in China and had also been bankrupt 3 times, and kind of gave him advice and helped him get a controller on to get his books going. And, he went public a couple of years ago for just under $500 million. And at that point, I became very enamored with the startup world, and I became an angel investor. I joined Golden Seeds out of their San Francisco office and did that for a while. I now sit on VC boards and I'm an advisor to angel groups. And so I love everything about the startup world. And really, the reason I did this book is I was so frustrated going all over the world and finding entrepreneurs who really had a solid business idea and couldn't figure out how to get funded. They were often attracted to bad actors or running this rat maze and couldn't move forward. But now, my focus, and I had to do this book just because I just wanted to teach people that, there's no lack of money out there, 269 trillion. And there's no lack of investors looking for a good deal. So I had to do the book, but mainly I work with a couple of very high-end disruptive companies. The one I'm currently working with is out of Belgrade, was introduced to me by Kevin Harrington. So I love really to make things happen. And I realize nothing happens without the right connections and with, raising money, getting the right story and getting in the right room.
Great. So that's your business, right? So that's the core business. Yet you spend a lot of time writing and a lot of time speaking. How does that support you finding the right deals, right? Because part of the startup and the VC and the angel world is too much money chasing too few smart ideas, right? So has the thought leadership and the content and making those investments of your time and energy helped you with access? Or talk about that for a moment.
Absolutely, Peter. So, after I started getting my feet wet and investing and lost a good amount of money being really naive, betting on the entrepreneur and not realizing how to do due diligence, I got a lot smarter. And I realized, and Golden Seeds did some research, and it may have come from the Kauffman Foundation, and found out that if you do less than 7 hours of due diligence on a startup, you can just plan on flushing your money down the toilet. But with 70 hours, you get 7x back your money. Well, very few people can do that alone, so it became important to join an angel group for me. But from being interviewed on, podcasts and being in articles and such, it really helped me teach and educate people. And I try to help everybody that reaches out to me. And then every once in a while, somebody will say, "Hey, Judy, I want you to go look at this deal." And, my little radar goes off and I go, "Oh my gosh, these people are really onto something," and I'll see what I can do to help them.
So let me extrapolate the thinking here more broadly, because most people are not in the angel world or the VC world or the startup world, but the template or the process or the methodology by which you follow could work for others, meaning you've got a message, you've got a value that you're providing to people vis-a-vis articles and books and speaking and all sorts of contents that you create. And the trick is to find those people, right? So I would argue that 99.9% of the universe couldn't care less about your stuff. And there would be a waste of time for you to try to put energy into getting in front of them. So how do you sort of filter out, this is the group I want to get in front of, whether that's through an article, speaking, et cetera? How do you find the right people, the right tribe to get your message out to?
You know, and part of this, Peter, and I'll tell you, I was so naive when I did my first book. If I would have found you, I would have said several Hail Marys and signed me up, and I'll send you a check. I was so naive when McGraw-Hill said, you need to build a platform. I'm like, what the heck is a platform? I mean, I was clueless. And I felt like I had a really good book, and I just worked my guts out, and often to no avail. And honestly, it's because I didn't know what I was doing. So I could have really used someone like you. But I remember I was so grateful when the first person agreed to have me on an interview for a blog. I actually made a batch of homemade fudge and sent it in the mail. And the person called me on the phone and said, oh my gosh, most people don't even say thank you, let alone do something nice. And she said to me, oh, I know other bloggers who are looking for people to interview. Would you like to be introduced? And then it occurred to me, and this is one of the key lessons I teach people, and it doesn't matter where you are in life, everybody's problem is somebody else's solution. And indeed, I decided I would set myself up as a good person to interview, that I would become good at it. I would provide show notes. I would get, the best microphone. And then I would start asking people, and I teach this in my first book. I call it the two golden questions. So I would say, number one, what other ideas do you have for me? And when I was being interviewed on monster.com, the sound engineer said, buy a Yeti mic. It'll only cost you $100 and it'll set you way ahead of everybody else. And my second question is, and what other ideas do you have for me? And I listened, and I literally worked my way up to NBC, CNN, and these different folks by being generous, by really figuring out what it was that they needed. And then I got smart, and I found somebody that knew what they were doing on social media. And with Twitter and LinkedIn, I now get requests to give speeches globally. People reach out to me. I just started doing short videos. I'm not quite sure how I will, get those into the platform. I'll be seeking your advice, but maybe that's helpful. So what I found is when I got a little exposure out there, then the right people in that 0.1% that would be interested in my message found me.
So let me go to the flip side of that, because I think the being generous, being easy to work with, providing valuable content, those are all great things, obviously. And not a lot of people do it. I can tell you now that I've been doing this podcast for, I don't know, just under a year, I think, I'm actually surprised by how many people, and I don't think they do it intentionally, are a bit difficult in the process, right? So they, we'll do a pre-podcast call because I want to make sure it's a fit. It's not a waste of my time or the guest time. And, I get on that call with somebody and they've paid a PR person to pitch, right? So they're clearly putting energy and time and effort and some money into this. And the person has no idea sort of who our audience is, what the message is. They haven't listened to any of the podcast. They really don't know anything about what we're trying to accomplish. And we're small potatoes. We're not a big deal. And I look at that and go, geez, why are you investing your time and money into getting your message out there, but you're not doing it well? And, I would be reluctant to then, recommend those folks to other folks that I know that have podcasts. So I think the fact that you make yourself easy to use and $100 for a microphone is nothing, but it's a huge deal when someone calls into a podcast on an iPhone in the back of an Uber or something like that, or doesn't really understand the goals or the context. So I think just being a good person and putting a little effort in.
You know what I thought of instantly, Peter. There's a guy in Utah who became fabulously wealthy by reading a one scripture out of Proverbs every day, and at the end of the month, starting over again. And he kind of challenged me to do that. And I'll never forget when I came upon this scripture that says you can take a mortar and a pestle and grind really hard trying to get a fool out of people, but you can't get it out. And a lot of people just aren't smart enough, and some of them actually are shy and nervous, and they don't understand that you're the customer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you are the customer, and so people need to pay close attention to you and who your audience is. Otherwise, it's not going to help them either.
Right. No, it's not going to help them, and it actually creates a little bit of a negative equity of when someone says, "Hey, who would you recommend to be on your, on your podcast?" And I have a long list of people that I would, and a short list of folks that I'd say I wouldn't. And it's not because they were a terrible interview per se. They just didn't put the effort in. They just didn't put
Yep.
any
Yep.
uh,
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
work in that was required to be a good guest. So great. So you find your small niche and you sort of flood them with content. I love the idea that you're experimenting in different formats. So you said a moment ago you're experimenting with video. Not sure how that'll work, but whatever. But I think that's sort of the point, is that the use of content against any specific audience is a series of experiments. There's no guarantees. There's no, E equal MC square in this world. And maybe your folks respond well to video, maybe they won't. Maybe it's infographic. I love that you cited research before. So I think that having that smorgasbord of modalities and formats and styles, how have you sort of experimented a bit? Give me an example, maybe some things that were a flop and some experiments that worked out well for you.
Well, good grief. My first book, I think I wasted $40,000 experimenting because I didn't know what I was doing. And, my agent had suggested that I do airport sales promotions. I think I sold 7 books.
Seven. How many of those
So
seven
yeah,
folks have the same last name, or they're all different?
yeah. No, nobody actually, but it's interesting, and I very quickly found out that there wasn't a silver bullet. But I also learned, as Einstein said, if you're going to play the game, you'd better know the rules. And I didn't understand the ecosystem. I didn't understand, really how it works. So it really helped me with, and I got the brick to the head. I mean, losing 40,000 was significant for me. And then I decided I'd better get a little smarter. And I called a couple of friends who had had successes with books and started, sharing notions. And then there's a group, and it's women authors, and many of them are really well known, that share information and are together. And so then I just made it a point to start learning from people who were better than I was and who had better experiences. And that saved me a lot of headaches, because what I found is there's a lot of people out there that are
Yeah.
happy to take your money, and with all kinds of promises, and it
Well,
doesn't
I
work.
think to your point, reaching out to others that you admire that have achieved a level of success and asking them. People are quite generous with their feedback and sharing their experiences. Number one. Number two, the $40,000 problem, and I've heard that same thing from far too many people at 20,000, 40,000, and 250,000, is you're doing things that seem to be logical. Here's a great PR firm or a great this or a great that. It looks like they know what they're doing because they've showed me their website and there's 20 other books that I recognize or whatever. But I think oftentimes what I've seen people do is not really, really understand what all the mumbo jumbo is. What are you trying to achieve, and how does that fit my niche? And just because maybe you were the publicist for, whatever, Good to Great or something like that, is that a real parallel to my book and the work I want to get out there? And I think you got to ask the hard questions.
Yeah, you do have to ask the hard questions, and also you've got to get in the game. I mean, you do probably have to lose some money and have some blood, sweat, and tears and bricks to the head, just to get you back on the right path and moving forward. And I do meet a lot of people who aren't engaging at all. They're not reaching out on Twitter they haven't researched what bloggers or podcasters are specific to their niche. And you can learn a lot from that. And like you said, most people will help if you ask.
Well, and even your point of learning who's in your niche, I've seen a lot of folks get onto blogs and I look at it and say, okay, but this is your market. This is the market that blogger serves. Why, or that podcaster serves. Why are you doing that? And it just,
Yep.
You're talking to a plumbing supply audience or something that's just totally outside of your sphere. And they
Yeah.
don't realize that in the world that we live in today, it's not the world that you or I grew up in, where there were, three choices of television networks, and everybody was watching one out of three. There's literally thousands, if not millions, of media channels, and you got to find half the battle is finding the right ones for your message.
Absolutely.
Cool. So as we start to wind down a little bit here, you've written several books. What is it that you're doing differently in terms of launching, releasing, strategy, etc., with your book that's in the process of coming out as we speak?
First off, all of those painful lessons from book one really helped with this book because I already had relationships now with bloggers, with writers. And so I was able to leverage those people up another level. I also had gained a lot of expertise from giving speeches, doing media stuff.
Okay.
And I had media training a few years ago. And actually doing the video is, and I'm interviewing people, I'm interviewing top VCs and angel investors and others, all of these things have kind of added up in a cumulative effect that have been really great. And, I hired, I'll just say Smith Publicity, which is phenomenal. I then found out HarperCollins hires
Yep.
them to work with
Yep.
authors. And I know you know them and they adore you. And then Pam, who does my social media, I kind of took that up another level. But, this was all beyond me when I first started. And, I could write a little blog or something about, helping people get started. And I wasted a lot of time and money. And I would tell people, you really focus on Twitter, really focus on LinkedIn, reach out to bloggers, podcasters. And initially I didn't care if I got the plumber because I was so happy that I got somebody to listen to me. And I guess I learned a little from the experience. But if you realize that all of these people, their problem is to find somebody good who has valuable content, who will be honest, vulnerable, and help, then you realize you're not out there feeling like you're begging, trying to get on a show or a TV show. And then, I started running into people who'd actually done TV. And so now I know somebody who knows 3 TV producers and has offered to help me with an introduction and help me with a pitch.
Very cool. So a lot of it, to me, if I were to recap what you said briefly, is you're sort of becoming an expert and mastering the craft of being a thoughtful thought leader from a marketing perspective, right? Because we didn't talk much about your specific content. It was really about how do you get it in the right hands or the right eyeballs at the right time in the right format, which is applicable across a wide range of content. But I love that you're sort of a lifelong learner when it comes to learning the nooks and crannies of Twitter and social and podcastosphere, if that's a place.
Sure, absolutely. And one of the good things for people is to make sure that they have top quality information for the show notes. With my last book, I had the top 10, golden Rolodex tips.
Yep.
And do that. And that helps you and it helps the show. And then it helps the show if you go out and, rate the podcaster and be generous because, they have taken their time to go through an interview process with you.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your time. You're eating your own dog food. You were honest. You provided us with great knowledge. You were vulnerable. You're transparent. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything more. So this has been fantastic. And I appreciate the time that you spent with us today.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's been a joy.
Thank you. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.